I'm Joe's cousin. I'm here to honor the memory of my favorite cousin. I can't eulogize him, not really, because we didn't see each other except a few times over 50 years. The people that really knew Joe, his family and friends can speak to man he was. Kind, friendly, hardworking family man with a wicked sense of humor, a good guy. I thought that was done very well today. It was a good eulogy. But he was like that from the beginning. We were very close in age, and for the first 20 years of our lives, we saw a lot of each other, both in Reno Sparks and in Klamath County, Oregon. We were privileged to have known our grandfather, Charlie Hess. And in fact, we were collectively named for him. I was named Charles Michael, and he was named Forrest Joseph. But we were extremely lucky to know such a man. We were adventurous youth, and occasionally got into trouble, near drowning, near cliff falling, near breaking our necks, jumping off a haystack. I could say more, but my mom is here and she would worry. In a sense, we grew up together, though separated by 7 hours or so of Northern California. And at that time, all of Joe's and my father's brothers and sisters were still alive. And the family would get together now and then for some of the holidays, most notably Easter's and Thanksgiving at the Campbell Ranch outside of Bly, Oregon. And our Uncle Paul's farm in Keno, Oregon. Paul had been a guide on the Rogue River back in the 1930s. And the family legend has it that he was Clark Gable's fishing guide on the road, and was the one who spirited Gable and Lombard off to their secret wilderness honeymoon. But I couldn't say if that was true or not. I think in the biography of it, it says Doc took them, but Paul was nicknamed Doc because at one time he made dentures. So I don't know if that really qualifies. But Paul loved to take Joe fishing. He had a lot of time for Joe, and they spent many hours floating around the Lake of the Woods fishing for kokanee and companionable silence, which Joe could be very, very good at. He was a great companion. Joe's father was a hard-working man whose life had many interesting chapters. But during the time Joe and I came along, he owned a trucking business in Sparks. My dad was a school teacher, and for some of the summer holidays, he worked for Forrest driving trucks. He had a fleet of belly dumps in the 50s and 60s during the Reno building boom. I often came along, and we spent weeks at a time roaming around their house in Virginia foothills, climbing. I don't recall the names of anything. It may have been Rattlesnake Mountain, but I thought it was Geiger Peak that we climbed, but this is a long time ago. Aunt Louise used to take Joe and Johnny and I swimming at the public pool in Carson City. And sometimes traveling out to the desert, she liked to look around old settlements for glass bottles and ironmongery and whatever she could find. On one of those occasions, Joe and I found a mason jar with a lid, and we naturally collected a bunch of scorpions and put them in there. Aunt Louise objected and took it away from us. She cocked it back to throw it, and the lid came off, and the scorpions fell down her back. But she wasn't harmed, thankfully, but but we were in trouble. And when you were in trouble with Louise, you were in trouble. She was something else. I didn't say much, but it was assertive. Sometimes we'd ride into Reno with Uncle Forrest, and he'd drop us off at the Virginia Street Bridge. And then Joe and I would rig our spinning rods with split shot, small gold hooks, salmon eggs, and we would fish along the bank all the way up to the hospital. And if any fish were caught, it would have been Joe. I don't think I have caught a scene. Really just throwing salmon eggs away. But when he'd come back to their house, Forrest would go in and he used bars of lava soap to scrub away all the grease and oil and diesel fuel. And often they'd take Joe and Johnny and I out to dinner at an Italian restaurant where everyone was just so happy to see them. And it was a real nice experience. It was like one of my first nice dining experiences in my life. I was never sure of the details, but one day, Johnny was just walking in school and he just dropped to the floor, and in just a matter of minutes he was dead. I recall hearing the term toxic shock syndrome, but I don't think anybody ever really knew. Whatever it was, it had a monumental effect on Anne Louise, who never really recovered. I traveled to Reno on a Greyhound to go to the funeral and to be with Joe to support him. I was never sure of the details, but an extraordinary thing happened after that. The church Forrest and Louise attended was associated with two nuns, sisters who were actually sisters, two McCarran sisters. The sisters gave, as far as I understood, the property of Patrick to Forrest. It was an old switchman signalman's house near the banks of the Truckee River. And Patrick, the next exit past Mustang was Patrick. And I drove by there today and I could not believe everything that's been built there and all that's there now. It's just unreal to me because it was so sort of desolate at the time. Louise converted the small living room to a shrine to Johnny, and she would sit there in the dark, hour after hour during the day. It was very unsettling to me, and I was happy to find ways to divert Joe when I visited. Naturally, the river was a great attraction. Aside from fishing in it, we journeyed up and down the banks, scouting for wildlife, hiking with our lunches in a rucksack, unleashing our inner huckleberry fins. We constructed a raft with the aim of floating miles and miles downstream, optimistically thinking we could hitch back from these great distances we were going to cover. We made the raft from truck tire inner tubes, there were no shortage of those, some boards, a piece of plywood for deck, all lashed together with nylon rope. The next morning we rose early and embarked, ready for an entire day's floating adventure. Our enthusiasm, sadly, ran over our competence, and within a mile or so, our vessel decomposed in some gentle rapids, and we abandoned the wreckage and swam and sloshed to shore and squelched home, ignominious into our huckleberry glory. We were lucky to live when we did and where we did, knowing so many cousins and extended family, and living in what I now realize was paradise. After that period, we began to diverge. The place at Patrick had become an aggregate pit, and Joe ran the loader and operated heavy equipment, a job he did for the rest of his life. I joined the Navy. I didn't know then that I would never have a better friend than Joe was to me.